I study emotions, and psychology is a really key part of my life, and as someone with autism, being interested in people is actually really important to me. And I think there's a parallel here. When something really upsets us, makes us really happy or really angry, that emotion doesn't last, no matter how intense the experience. Our ability to be in a moment and to be massively disturbed by a moment is directly linked to our brains, to our brain chemistry. And no matter how awful an experience is, you will return to homeostasis. You will go back to some degree of baseline. It might be a different baseline, but it will naturalize as a baseline. And we'll do it with COVID-19. For better or for worse.
When I was in Stratford earlier, I was walking past shops that probably 3 months ago I would have been like, oh, I'm just going to go in quickly. And I was just kind of like, no, I don't want to, I don't need to, like, just get
hug and stuff. You're like, oh, that's really weird. Like, why are they doing that? And I think, like, later on, as time goes on, we'll kind of, like, maybe it'll be a gradual kind of, like, back to normality, if whatever that means at this point. But for now, I think most of us are going to carry on with...
we'll return back to what we had before the pandemic. I mean, you can already see everyone seems quite... Maybe they're not showing it as much outwardly, but I think it seems like everyone else is okay. Like, not a lot of people wearing face coverings anywhere. Like, it's just a... I think it does seem like that.
People forget things really quickly. The safe thing to do I think people have already forgotten things really quickly.
I think if there was an election in the next year or something, I think it would be more likely. And I think actually a lot of how the pandemic and the approach to the pandemic have played out are quite unequal anyway. And the people who are getting hit the hardest are the people who don't have the option to work from home. I don't mean people like us, I mean people who have lower paid jobs that are like quite unquote unskilled workers who don't have the option to stay home.
But I think that now I see it like bigger, like everything is more distant and I have to walk like for hours or something, and I kind of avoid
like
going
my normal
places,
would be to come home and
I have
do nothing, chat with people. Now I can't do that. I think this is not the established normality, but I do think that potentially the new normality will be then different from the previous one, but it's not what we're living right now. Not feel constrained, to have more accessibility to
this experience of just
not have this sense
it's hard to feel extremely bored and quite aggressive for no reason, and
it's too rainy, it's cold all the time, it never stops raining.
Okay, this is a new normal.
I forgot
cheerless and glum. Oh, we want to go to Ibiza. And now you get one fucking day of nice weather. No, it's too hot. It's too bloody hot. I'm sweating. Get over it. Get over it. The weather changes. You live on a rainy island in the middle of the ocean. Enjoy the sun while you have it.
It's not just about
behaviors, clothing, things which have been light,
Let's wait for the boys. Like now the boys are coming in.
Hello, it's me, Doggy.
Could you please?
Am I allowed to be Doggy now?
Close. Hello, nice to see you.
Hello, it's me, Christopher Crocodile.
No, it's not Christopher.
When it will change anyway. Some of the normal will change. That's all. You know, there'll be changes. It'll be outside what was before,
but
as you would say, is normal. Well, it's just a good thing. It's a good thing to me. You know, because things that we were doing before we weren't managing properly before, and then that brought us to.
So before the lockdown, I
felt
that so much of our time as a family was taken by doing things.
And I'd just like to say one last thing.
And it takes time and effort to learn how to communicate and process the emotions that we encounter in our give and take, everyday give and take. So I really felt there was not enough time because of just the pressure of the things we had to do.
It feels slower. It feels a bit suspended in time because there's a lot less activity. Even as people are getting up and doing things still, or now, it still feels like, somehow softer and more expansive and just quieter, almost like
it's kind of like
the environment that I grew up in.
And I think it will take about 2 to 3, 4 years, almost like a world war, to get back to whatever it is that we lived before.
I can't keep tapping the card, you know, 'cause I can't keep, before I know where I am, I'm in debt or overdrawn. That's right. See, so I have to, balance, like live from day to day.
Positive in some ways, this lack of people. Sometimes it felt disturbing. It was like a post-apocalyptic scenery, especially when you could see that there were policemen in various corners. I want to clarify that even though I enjoy this time, this is not.
And I think that's when I come up against for myself being like in a committed relationship or being single and available. It's like it's kind of the same thing. Like they both have their pros and their cons, right? So and it actually like okay, the grass is greener on that side.
Spaces where I live, my home. To me, so much of the spaces that I live in and the spaces where I feel at home are the artistic spaces of my city, the stages, the galleries, the music venues, the art spaces, the theatres. And with the lockdown, all of those places are gone. They're the places that are my work, but also my play. That's the feeling of home to me. That's where most of my life happens, where most of my relationships with other people, all those connections happen. And the lockdown has just changed totally my relationship with the space where I live in, because so much
this kind of time at home
of that artistic space
and having to be home so much
closed,
kind of forced me to do all of those improvements. So, I bought a desk. I've lived in this flat for 7 years and I didn't have a proper desk to sit at and do my work. So I bought a desk, just little things for the kitchen, like, bought a new knife set, bought a sandwich toaster. It sounds really boring and trivial, but I finally did all these things to
generally
just make
as
myself
kind of their base disposition. I tend not to be, so a kind of created room, I guess, for me to
rainforests, we have alpine regions, we have deserts and beaches and cities. We have absolutely everything, and I'm just fascinated with how I've managed to miss all that, and I cannot wait to explore
because the
it.
lockdown has taken away our physical spaces.
Have our own
some ways,
space if we want to, our own personal space if we need it.
The environments that I call my
it's a really beautiful space as well.
the workspace, the artistic has become so much more accessible in some ways. Suddenly, so to our
in
It is a world of its own, with its own laws and its residents, and you don't have to worry about your breath or your lungs, because they're both useless to you down there anyway. And you know that. It's a fact. It's not scary. Είναι ένα από τα λίγα μέρη στα οποία μπορείς να νιώσεις ελεύθερος. One of the few places you can feel free. Our bodies are allowed to play underwater. Still, it almost feels like a connection, like bringing yourself back into your own body. When you're underwater, you can feel everything else fading away. What is beyond the surface simply doesn't matter. And the world as we know it changes. Gravity doesn't pull you down, you just float. I think it's one of the very few things that offers me a sense of optimism. It kind of makes me think that maybe we're not drowning, maybe we're diving. And diving is in itself a very optimistic action, very brave, very hopeful. Because diving means taking a leap of faith. Because every time we dive, we know that we're somehow going to find our way back to the surface.